The massive council chamber buzzed with noise as hundreds of alien beings filled the floating seats. The Galactic Council met every 3 months to discuss new worlds to add to their empire. Today felt different. Excitement filled the air like electricity before a storm. Delegate Krilthar stood at the center podium. His tall, thin body cast strange shadows under the bright lights. His forearms moved as he spoke, and his large eyes scanned the crowd. The Vexani Empire had found something special, and everyone knew it. Hansol sat in the small observer section. He wore a simple black suit that looked plain next to the colorful robes and metal armor around him. 3 months ago, nobody knew. Humans existed. Now he was here as Earth's first representative. Most aliens still treated him like a child who had wandered into an adult meeting. Fellow delegates. Krilthar's voice boomed through the chamber. His translator made his words sound smooth and confident. Today I present an opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. The lights dimmed and a huge hologram appeared above the crowd. It showed a blue and green planet floating in space. White clouds swirled around its surface. Many delegates leaned forward to get a better look. This world is called Terra by its inhabitants, Krilthar continued. Our scouts have studied it for several cycles. What they found will amaze you. The hologram zoomed in to show vast oceans and green continents. Numbers appeared next to the image, showing water amounts, mineral wealth, and energy readings. Several delegates made excited noises. The water reserves alone could supply our colonies for centuries, Krilthar said. The mineral deposits include rare metals we desperately need, but best of all, this world is almost defenseless. Hansol felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face calm. Beside him, Ji-hoon shifted in his seat. The military officer's hand moved slightly toward his pocket, where he kept his communication device. Our scouts counted approximately 8 billion inhabitants, Krilthar went on. They live in scattered settlements across the continents. Their technology is primitive at best. They still use chemical rockets to reach their own moon. Most of their energy comes from burning fossil fuels. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Several delegates shook their heads in disbelief. How could any species be so far behind? Their weapons are equally backward, Krilthar added. Basic, nuclear devices, crude missiles, and simple projectile weapons. They have no energy shields, no plasma cannons, and no orbital defense platforms. Their militaries are divided into hundreds of separate groups that seem to fight each other more than they cooperate. More laughter filled the room. Elder Vextar from the ancient Corvani Empire stood up. Surely you jest, Krilthar. No spacefaring. Civilization could be so unprepared. That's just it, Krilthar replied with a wide grin. They're barely spacefaring at all. Their longest space missions last only months. They've never traveled beyond their own star system. They don't even know we exist. The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Delegates turned to each other, discussing the possibilities. Some were already calculating how to divide the planet's resources. Hansol watched all this with growing concern. These aliens had no idea what they were talking about. Their scouts had clearly seen only what humans wanted them to see. He glanced at Ji-hoon, who gave him a tiny nod. They both understood the situation perfectly. The conquest should be simple. Krilthar continued. My fleet commanders estimate no more than 1 standard rotation to secure the planet. We could establish mining operations within 2 rotations. The native population could be relocated to preserve wildlife or used as a labor force. Several delegates applauded. The idea of such an easy conquest appealed to many. Resources without a real fight? It sounded too good to be true. General Hixron from the militant Sardak Confederation stood up. What about their population size? 8 billion is not insignificant, even if they're primitive. Numbers mean nothing without proper weapons or coordination, Krilthar replied dismissively. Our standard invasion protocol can handle 10 times that number. These beings don't even have a unified planetary government. They're split into nearly 200 separate political entities that constantly argue with each other. Hansol almost smiled at that comment. If only they knew how quickly those arguing nations could unite when faced with a real threat. I call for an immediate vote, Krilthar announced. Why wait? Every day we delay gives these primitives more time to discover space travel. Though at their current rate, That won't happen for centuries. The chamber filled with agreement. Most delegates seemed ready to vote right away. The prospect of easy resources was too tempting to ignore. Elder Sujin from the peaceful Zentari collective raised her hand. Perhaps we should hear from the human observer before we vote. After all, this is his species we're discussing. Some delegates groaned. They didn't want to waste time listening to a primitive. Others seemed curious about what the human might say. Krilthar's expression soured. Very well. But let's not pretend this changes anything. What could this primitive possibly tell us that our advanced scouts missed? Hansol stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. He felt the weight of their stares, the mixture of curiosity and condescension. Most of them looked at him like he was an interesting pet that had learned to speak. Honored delegates, Hansol said, his voice calm and clear. I appreciate your interest in my homeworld. However, I believe there may be some gaps in your intelligence. He walked toward the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. Ji-hoon and the other humans watched him carefully, ready to support whatever he said. Before you vote on this invasion, Hansol continued, perhaps you would allow me to share some additional information about Earth and its inhabitants. Krilthar's forearms crossed impatiently. Speak quickly, primitive. The council has important matters to discuss. Hansol smiled slightly. It wasn't a friendly smile. Of course. I just want to make sure you have all the facts before you make such an important decision. The chamber waited. Delegates shifted in their seats, eager to get on with the vote. They had no idea they were about to learn something that would change everything they thought they knew about humans. Hansol looked around the room one more time. These aliens thought they were predators about to pounce on helpless prey. Soon, they would discover which species was really the predator. Hansol walked to the central podium with steady steps. The massive chamber fell quiet as hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. His translator hummed softly, ready to carry his words to every corner of the room. Honored delegates, he began, his voice clear and respectful. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak about my homeworld. He gestured toward the holographic image of Earth still floating above the chamber. The blue and green planet looked peaceful and beautiful in the soft light. Delegate Krilthar has shared some interesting observations about Earth, Hansol continued. However, I believe there are some important details that may have been missed during the scouting missions. Krilthar's four arms twitched with impatience. Get to the point, primitive. What could your backward species possibly know that our advanced scouts didn't discover? Hansol nodded politely. Well, for example, those scattered settlements your scouts observed, they're actually interconnected. Cities, each housing millions of people. Our largest metropolitan areas contain over 30 million inhabitants each. Several delegates shifted in their seats. That was a lot more people than they had imagined living in one place. Yeonsu, sitting with the human delegation, activated her datapad. New images began appearing on the chamber's displays. Satellite photos showed vast urban areas stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Highways filled with millions of vehicles. Airports with thousands of aircraft. Ports with massive cargo ships. These images show just a few of our major population centers, Hansol explained. New York, Tokyo, London, Shanghai. Each one coordinates with hundreds of smaller cities through advanced communication networks. The delegates stared at the images with growing surprise. These weren't primitive settlements. They were massive, complex urban centers that rivaled anything in their own civilizations. General Hicksran leaned forward. Impressive for primitives, but surely these are just large groups huddled together for protection. Real military power requires advanced weapons and space-based defenses. You raise an excellent point, Hansol replied. Let me show you some of our defensive capabilities. More images flashed across the displays. Aircraft carriers longer than many alien ships carrying dozens of fighter jets. Nuclear submarines that could hide in Earth's deep oceans for months. Intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching any point on the planet within minutes. While we may not have energy weapons or plasma cannons, Hansol said, we have developed our own approaches to long-range warfare. The images continued. Satellite networks providing global communication and surveillance, radar systems that could track objects in space, underground bunkers designed to survive nuclear attacks, early warning systems that could detect incoming threats from orbit. Elder Sujin's bioluminescent patches flickered with interest. These weapons, they use explosive chemicals and metal projectiles. Among other things, yes, Hansol confirmed. We've found that kinetic energy can be quite effective when properly applied. A metal projectile moving fast enough can penetrate most armor. He paused to let that sink in. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. They were used to energy shields that could stop plasma bolts, but physical projectiles were harder to defend against. Of course, we've also developed more exotic weapons, Hansol continued casually. Nuclear devices that can level entire cities, chemical weapons that can clear large areas, biological agents that target specific genetic markers. The chamber grew very quiet. Delegate Zixara from the Insectoid Hive Collective spoke up nervously. You use weapons that destroy indiscriminately? When necessary, Hansol replied with a slight shrug. We prefer more precise methods, but sometimes massive firepower is the most effective solution. Tai Min, another member of the human delegation, stood up. Honored delegates, my colleague is being modest. Perhaps it would help if you could review our complete military history. He began uploading a massive file to the Council's shared database. The file size indicator climbed steadily. 1 terabyte, 5 terabytes, 10 terabytes. Several alien computer systems started making warning sounds as they tried to process the enormous amount of data. What is this? Demanded Krilthar, staring at his datapad in confusion. Our military records, Taman replied simply. Complete documentation of human warfare from our earliest recorded history to the present day. The file size stopped climbing at nearly 50 terabytes. Delegates across the chamber stared at their devices in shock. What kind of species needed that much data to record their military activities? Surely this is an error, protested Elder Vextar. No species could have so much warfare to document. Hansol looked at him seriously. Elder Vextar, that file represents approximately 10,000 years of continuous military conflict. And it's not complete. We're still discovering new archaeological evidence of earlier wars. Continuous conflict? Elder Sujin asked, her patches now flickering with alarm. You mean your species has been at war for 10 millennia? At war with ourselves, Hansol clarified. We've had very little contact with other species until recently. Most of our military experience comes from fighting each other. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. These humans hadn't just developed weapons to fight occasional territorial disputes. They had been in a state of constant warfare for their entire recorded history. But how do you maintain civilization if you're always fighting? Asked Delegate Morgan from the trading-focused Mercantile Union. We've gotten very good at fighting limited wars while maintaining our infrastructure, Hansol explained. Most conflicts involve only small portions of our population and territory. We've learned to wage war efficiently without destroying everything we've built. Yansu added more images to the displays. Factories that could rapidly switch from producing civilian goods to military equipment. Transportation networks designed to move troops and supplies quickly across continents. Communication systems that could operate even during major conflicts. We call it total war capability, she explained. The ability to mobilize our entire civilization for conflict while keeping essential services running. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. Delegates began to realize that they weren't looking at a primitive species with basic weapons. They were looking at a civilization that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare. Krilthar tried to regain control of the situation. This is all very interesting, but they're still using primitive technology. Chemical rockets, metal projectiles, nuclear fission. How can such crude weapons threaten our advanced fleets? Hansol smiled again, and this time several delegates noticed that it didn't reach his eyes. Delegate Krilthar, you raise an excellent point about our technology. Perhaps you'd like to know how quickly we develop new weapons when we're properly motivated? He gestured to the displays, which now showed a timeline. During our last global conflict, we went from basic flight to jet aircraft in 6 years. From the first nuclear reaction to weapons capable of destroying cities in 3 years. From primitive computers to global communication networks in 2 decades. The timeline continued, showing how each major conflict had driven rapid technological advancement. New materials, new energy sources, new manufacturing techniques, all developed under the pressure of military necessity. The pattern is quite consistent, Han Sol observed. When humans face an existential threat, we tend to accelerate our technological development considerably. He looked directly at Krilthar. So I suppose the real question is, how much time do you think an invasion fleet would give us to upgrade our technology? The massive historical database finished uploading, and delegates across the chamber began accessing the information. What they found sent waves of confusion and growing fear through the assembly. Computer systems across the chamber began displaying statistics, battle maps, and casualty reports that defied belief. Min Ho, a human historian with graying hair and calm demeanor, was granted permission to provide context. He stood slowly and activated the chamber's main display, showing a timeline that stretched back thousands of years. What you're reviewing, Min Ho explained in a steady voice, is humanity's military history. Please note that, unlike most species, who developed spaceflight and then occasionally engaged in territorial disputes, humans have been in a state of continuous warfare for our entire recorded history. The display showed an overwhelming cascade of conflicts. Red markers appeared on a world map, showing battles, invasions, sieges, and wars. The markers multiplied until the entire planet seemed to glow red with conflict. The Mongol conquests involved over 4 million soldiers and conquered the largest land empire in history, Min Ho continued, pointing to a series of red arrows sweeping across Asia. The 100 Years' War lasted 116 years. World War I involved 32 nations and resulted in 20 million casualties. Delegate Yuna from the crystalline Silkari asked in a trembling voice, "These numbers, they indicate your species has eliminated over 20 million of your own kind in a single conflict." World War I, yes, Min Ho confirmed matter-of-factly. World War II involved over 100 million military personnel and resulted in approximately 70 million deaths. Both wars occurred within 30 years of each other. The chamber fell silent except for the soft sounds of delegates' computers processing the horrific statistics. Many had stopped eating or drinking, staring at their displays in shock. But surely these were ancient conflicts? Elder Vextar asked hopefully. Your species must have evolved beyond such brutality? Min Ho shook his head. Since World War II ended in 1945, there have been over 250 significant conflicts involving human nations. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, countless regional conflicts. At any given moment in the last century, humans have been fighting somewhere on our planet. Hyun Woo, a military strategist with sharp eyes and precise movements, stood to add context. Honorable delegates, what may be most relevant to your current discussion is how humans respond to existential threats. He activated new displays showing alliance patterns throughout history. When faced with external dangers, humans consistently demonstrate a tendency to unite our competing factions. Countries that had been enemies for centuries joined forces against common threats. The displays showed how quickly human alliances could form and mobilize. The Allied powers of World War II had gone from separate nations to coordinated military forces spanning multiple continents within months. Currently, Earth has 195 separate nations, Hyun Woo continued. These nations maintain approximately 2 million active military personnel, with another 5 million in reserve forces. In times of crisis, mandatory service, laws could mobilize over 1 billion additional soldiers within 6 months. General Hicksran's mandibles clicked nervously. 1 billion soldiers? How do you equip such numbers? Human industrial capacity during wartime expands dramatically, Hyunwoo replied. During World War II, the United States alone produced 300,000 aircraft, 100,000 tanks, and 6,000 naval vessels in 4 years. That was with 1940s technology and a population of 130 million. He gestured to new statistics appearing on the displays. Current human population is over 8 billion, with industrial capacity thousands of times greater. Our automotive industry alone produces over 80 million vehicles annually. Converting that capacity to military production would result in unprecedented equipment manufacture. The implications were staggering. The aliens were used to species that had small professional militaries and limited industrial capacity. The idea of an entire civilization geared toward warfare was completely outside their experience. Elder Sujin's bioluminescent patches flickered frantically. You're suggesting that an invasion would not face scattered primitive settlements, but rather a unified planetary defense force of 8 billion individuals with 10,000 years of military experience. Han Sol finished quietly. Each conflict has taught us new lessons about strategy, tactics, logistics, and technology. Boram, Azar, human psychologist with an understanding of alien thinking, requested permission to speak. Delegates, there's another factor to consider. Human civilization has developed what we call asymmetric warfare, the art of defeating technologically superior opponents through unconventional means. She activated historical case studies showing smaller forces defeating larger, better-equipped enemies. Vietnamese fighters defeated advanced American forces through guerrilla tactics. Afghani resistance movements have defeated multiple superpowers over centuries. Throughout history, humans have specialized in finding ways to win against impossible odds. The displays showed ambush tactics, sabotage operations, psychological warfare campaigns that had brought down empires. Humans had turned disadvantage into advantage so many times it had become a military art form. Our species has also developed biological and chemical weapons. Changmin, a military attaché, added grimly. Though we've largely banned their use against each other through international treaties, an external invasion would void those treaties immediately. Several delegates made distressed sounds. The peaceful species in the chamber had never encountered weaponized diseases or toxic gases designed to kill efficiently. We've weaponized diseases that target specific genetic markers, Changmin continued relentlessly. Chemical agents that persist in the environment for decades. Biological weapons that could potentially target alien physiology, if we had sufficient research time. Elder Haijin from the ancient Mordaki hegemony, who had observed thousands of galactic conflicts over her long lifetime, spoke with evident concern. The pattern you describe is highly unusual. Most species develop ethical restrictions that limit their warfare as they advance technologically. You seem to have developed more effective warfare alongside your ethics. Jae Sung, a human philosopher, nodded gravely. We do have extensive rules governing warfare, yes. The Geneva Conventions, international humanitarian law, treaties limiting certain weapons, but these ethical frameworks apply specifically to conflicts between human nations. He paused meaningfully. We have no established protocols for ethical treatment of invading alien forces. No treaties limiting our response to extraterrestrial aggression. No moral framework constraining our actions against species threatening Earth's survival. The chamber grew cold as delegates realized the implications. They had assumed they were discussing the conquest of a primitive world governed by simple beings. Instead, they were contemplating invasion of a planet inhabited by what amounted to 8 billion highly experienced, technologically adaptive, psychologically sophisticated warriors who had no moral constraints against alien enemies. Krilthar made one last attempt to salvage his proposal. Surely raw numbers and experience cannot overcome our technological advantages. Our weapons are energy-based, our ships travel faster than light. Our defenses can withstand planetary bombardment. Technology is important, Han Sol agreed. But history shows that technological advantages can be overcome through superior tactics, better intelligence, and more effective use of available resources. He smiled that cold smile again. Besides, our technological assessment of your capabilities has been quite thorough. Assessment? Krilthar's voice cracked slightly. What assessment? Insu, the head of Human Intelligence Services, stood slowly. His expression was completely neutral, which somehow made him more frightening than if he had been threatening. Delegate Krilthar, Insu said quietly, Might I ask how your preliminary scouts gathered their reconnaissance data about Earth? Krilthar's confidence completely evaporated as Insu's question hung in the air like a death sentence. His forearms trembled slightly as he responded. Our stealth vessels conducted standard orbital surveys using advanced cloaking technology. Your primitive sensors could never detect our ships? Ah. Insu nodded with a slight smile that made several delegates shiver. And these stealth vessels, were they perhaps detected by what you assumed were primitive sensor networks? The human delegation exchanged knowing looks. Ji-hoon pulled out his communication device and began typing rapidly. The message he sent would reach Earth's military command within minutes. Impossible, Krilthar protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Our cloaking technology is millennia ahead of anything your species possesses. Delegate Krilthar, Insu continued in the same calm tone, human radar technology can track objects moving at tremendous speeds through space. We routinely monitor thousands of satellites, space debris, asteroids, and other objects in our solar system. Did you really think we wouldn't notice new objects appearing in our space? Sujin, a human engineer with practical experience in detection systems, activated a new display. It showed Earth's actual defensive capabilities, and the chamber gasped collectively at what they saw. These are our early warning systems, she explained matter-of-factly. Ground-based radar installations that can detect objects approaching from deep space. Space-based telescopes that monitor the entire solar system. Satellite networks providing real-time surveillance of near-Earth space. The displays showed a complex web of sensors, communication links, and monitoring stations. But more disturbing were the hidden military installations that began appearing on the images. The primitive infrastructure you observed represents only our civilian space program, Sujin continued. Our military space research has been more extensive. Much more extensive. Images flashed across the displays that made the alien delegates lean back in their seats. Orbital platforms disguised as research stations. Satellites that looked commercial but carried military sensors. Underground facilities built deep into mountains and ocean floors. Cheyenne Mountain can survive direct nuclear attack and coordinate global military responses, she explained, showing a facility buried under hundreds of meters of solid rock. NORAD tracks over 34,000 objects in Earth orbit continuously. The National Reconnaissance Office operates surveillance satellites with resolution measured in centimeters. Elder Sujin's bioluminescence shifted to patterns indicating deep alarm. You're saying Earth has been intentionally concealing its true defensive capabilities? Dong-hyun, the human strategic planning officer, nodded. Standard military doctrine: never reveal your true strength until you understand your enemy's capabilities. He paused meaningfully. We've been studying your technologies through the reconnaissance visits you thought were undetected. The revelation sent shockwaves through the council chamber. Delegates began to realize they hadn't been secretly observing a primitive world. They had been unknowingly providing a highly militaristic species with detailed intelligence about galactic council capabilities, technologies, and weaknesses. Every time your scouts approached Earth, Dong-hyun continued, our sensors tracked their movements, analyzed their energy signatures, and recorded their technological specifications. We've been building detailed profiles of your ships, weapons, and defensive systems for months. Changmin stood up and activated another set of displays. Our scientists have been reverse engineering what we've learned. We may not have faster-than-light travel yet, but we understand the principles behind your propulsion systems. Images showed human research facilities working on exotic technologies, fusion reactors based on alien energy signatures, particle accelerators designed to replicate observed weapon effects, materials laboratories analyzing metal fragments left behind by scout ships. We've also been developing countermeasures, Changmin added with professional calm, electromagnetic pulse weapons that could disable electronics based on your technology, kinetic interceptors designed to target your ship configurations, stealth technology adapted from your own cloaking methods. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as delegates realized the full scope of human preparation. They had thought they were gathering intelligence on helpless primitives. Instead, they had been teaching their victims how to fight back. General Hicksran stood up abruptly. This is madness. How could primitives develop such capabilities so quickly? Boram, the human psychologist, smiled coldly. General, you're thinking like a peaceful species. Humans don't think like peaceful species. When we identify a potential threat, we immediately begin preparing for war. She activated psychological profiles that made uncomfortable reading. Human military doctrine assumes that any unknown contact represents a potential enemy. First contact protocols include immediate threat assessment, defensive preparation, and offensive planning. The profiles showed how human governments had responded to the first evidence of alien surveillance. Within days, military budgets had been redirected towards space-based defense research. Within weeks, international cooperation agreements had been signed. Within months, global military coordination had reached unprecedented levels. You see, Boram explained, humans have never encountered a truly friendly alien species in our fiction or planning scenarios. Most of our cultural references involve hostile alien invasions. We've been psychologically prepared for this situation for decades. Taemin activated a new set of displays showing human popular culture, movies about alien invasions, books about interstellar warfare, games simulating space combat. The chamber watched in growing horror as they realized that humans had been imagining and planning for alien conflicts for generations. Our entertainment industry has explored thousands of scenarios involving hostile alien contact, Taemin explained. Military strategists study these fictional scenarios for tactical insights. We've essentially been conducting theoretical war, games against alien invaders for over a century. The implications were staggering. Not only had humans been preparing militarily for alien contact, they had been preparing psychologically and culturally as well. The entire species had been primed to view aliens as potential threats. Minji, the human tactical analyst, provided the final piece of the puzzle. Current projections suggest a 73% probability that any invasion fleet would be completely neutralized before reaching Earth's surface. The chamber fell silent as she continued. The remaining 27% represents scenarios where we allow partial landings to study alien ground combat capabilities before eliminating the threats. Allow partial landings? Elder Vextar asked in a horrified whisper. Standard intelligence gathering, Minji replied as if discussing the weather. Capture alien equipment and personnel for study. Analyze combat tactics and technological capabilities. Test our defensive systems under real combat conditions. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Once we've gathered sufficient intelligence, we would implement full countermeasures and eliminate all hostile forces. The clinical way she described using an invasion force as a learning opportunity sent chills through the chamber. These humans weren't just warriors, they were strategists who could think several moves ahead. Insu stepped forward again. Delegates, there's one more thing you should know. This entire council session has been broadcast live to Earth's military command centers. Every alien in the chamber turned to stare at him. Broadcast? Krilthar managed to whisper. Real-time transmission, Insu confirmed. Earth's military leadership is currently watching this discussion and calculating response scenarios for each fleet composition represented in this chamber. He checked his communication device. I've just received confirmation that preliminary targeting data has been uploaded to our defense systems. Every delegate's home system now has detailed strategic assessments available to our military planners. The chamber descended into chaos as delegates realized they had not only revealed their own military capabilities, but had also provided potential targets for human retaliation. What had begun as a discussion about conquering primitives had become a strategic nightmare of unprecedented proportions. The chamber descended into chaos as Insu's words sank in. Delegates jumped from their seats, speaking rapidly into communication devices, trying to contact their home fleets. The calm, orderly council meeting had become a scene of panic and confusion. Order! Order! Elder Sujin called out, her bioluminescent patches flashing emergency patterns. Let us maintain some dignity in this proceeding. But dignity was the last thing on anyone's mind. General Hixran was frantically typing commands into his military communicator. Delegate Zixara's insectoid features showed pure terror as she realized her hive fleets were now marked as potential targets by an unknown but clearly dangerous species. Hansol returned to the central podium, and somehow his calm presence gradually quieted the chaos. He waited patiently as delegates slowly returned to their seats, though many continued to clutch their communication devices. "Honored delegates," Hansol began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I believe there may have been some misunderstandings about humanity's intentions and capabilities." Krilthar, his earlier confidence completely shattered, stood on shaking legs. What do you want from us?" "Nothing more than peaceful coexistence," Hansol replied simply. "Humans are quite reasonable when not threatened with invasion and genocide." He gestured to the displays, which now showed peaceful images of Earth. Cities full of people going about their daily lives, children playing in parks, farmers tending crops, scientists working in laboratories. "We're actually quite a cooperative species when we're not at war," Hansol continued. "We build hospitals, schools, art museums. We explore space for scientific knowledge. We create music, literature, and philosophy. We fall in love, raise families, and dream of better futures." The contrast with the military capabilities they had just witnessed was jarring. How could the same species that had weaponized diseases and planned global warfare also create such beauty and peaceful civilization? But Hansol's voice took on a harder edge. "We also remember our history. We know that peaceful species can be destroyed by aggressive ones. We know that survival sometimes requires terrible choices." Yonsu activated new displays showing human refugee camps, destroyed cities, and memorials to war victims. Every human learns about genocide, ethnic cleansing, and the systematic destruction of entire populations. These are not abstract concepts to us. They are historical facts that shape how we view existential threats. The message was clear. Humans understood exactly what alien conquest would mean for their species, and they were prepared to do anything necessary to prevent it. Elder Hyajin spoke slowly, her ancient voice heavy with concern. "Young delegate, what would humanity require to feel secure in this galaxy?" Hansol considered the question carefully. "Mutual respect, recognition of Earth's sovereignty, trade agreements that benefit all parties, and assurance that no council member will attempt to conquer or destroy human civilization." "And if such assurances were provided," Elder Sujin asked, "then humans would be delighted to share our knowledge, culture, and friendship." Hansol replied warmly. "We're naturally curious about other species. Many of our people dream of exploring the galaxy and learning from alien civilizations." But his expression hardened again. "However, if any species attempts to invade Earth or harm human populations, they will discover exactly how effective 10,000 years of military evolution can be." Dong-hyun stood up with a datapad in his hand. "I've just received updated strategic assessments from Earth Command. Our military analysts have now completed preliminary invasion scenarios for every fleet configuration represented in this chamber." He began reading from his device with clinical precision. "Vexani Empire. Estimated fleet strength 2,400 vessels. Projected time to neutralization 14 standard hours using kinetic bombardment and electromagnetic warfare." Several Vexani delegates made distressed sounds. Dong-hyun continued reading. "Sardak Confederation. Estimated fleet strength 800 heavy assault vessels. Projected neutralization time 6 hours using nuclear mines and particle beam countermeasures." "Stop," General Hicksran shouted. "How can primitives make such calculations?" "We're not primitives," Minji, the tactical analyst, replied matter-of-factly. "We're a species that has spent millennia perfecting warfare against opponents using every conceivable strategy and technology. Your fleets represent tactical problems we can solve." She activated new displays, showing computer simulations of space battles. Human ships, clearly built with alien technology but using human tactical doctrine, engaged council fleets in rapid, brutal conflicts. Human strategic doctrine emphasizes speed, overwhelming firepower, and psychological warfare, she explained as the simulations played out. "We don't engage in honorable single combat or proportional responses. When humans fight, we fight to win completely and permanently." The simulations showed exactly what that meant. Human forces didn't just defeat enemy fleets, they annihilated them using coordinated attacks from multiple directions, weapons specifically designed to exploit alien technological weaknesses, and tactics that left no survivors to carry intelligence back to enemy command structures. Furthermore, Chang Min added, human military doctrine includes retaliation against the home systems of attacking forces. Invasion of Earth would result in immediate counterattack against the aggressor's civilian population centers. The chamber grew deadly quiet. Most galactic species fought limited wars with military targets and honored certain basic rules of engagement. The idea of total warfare against civilian populations was almost unthinkable. You would attack non-combatants? Elder Vextar asked in horror. You just proposed conquering our entire planet and relocating our population for use as slave labor, Han Sol pointed out coldly. What did you think we would consider proportional response? The logic was unassailable and absolutely terrifying. Humans didn't just defend themselves, they eliminated threats permanently to prevent future attacks. Insu checked his communication device again. I'm receiving confirmation that Earth's deep space monitoring stations have identified and cataloged the current positions of all Council member home systems. This information has been distributed to our strategic command centers. He looked up at the assembled delegates with neutral professionalism. Earth Command reports that preliminary targeting solutions are now available for all major population centers, industrial facilities, and military installations within 50 light-years of Earth. 50 light-years? Elder Sujin gasped. But that includes hundreds of systems. Correct, Insu confirmed. Human doctrine assumes that any species capable of mounting interstellar invasion represents a permanent threat that must be eliminated completely. The delegates began to understand the true scope of what they were dealing with. Humans didn't just fight wars. They fought to ensure their enemies could never threaten them again. Krilthar finally broke the terrified silence. I formally withdraw my proposal for invasion of the Terran system. Wise decision, Han Sol acknowledged. But I think we can do better than simply avoiding conflict. He activated new displays showing peaceful space stations, trading vessels, and scientific expeditions. Humans have much to offer the galactic community. Our industrial capacity, our scientific creativity, our cultural diversity. We could be valuable allies rather than dangerous enemies. Elder Sujin's bioluminescence gradually shifted to calmer patterns. What would humanity propose as an alternative to the conquest scenario? Trade agreements, Han Sol replied immediately. Cultural exchange programs, joint scientific expeditions, mutual defense treaties, the same relationships that have allowed different human nations to coexist peacefully. He smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely warm. Humans are actually quite good at cooperation when we're not fighting for survival. The chamber remained quiet as delegates considered this dramatic shift from potential victims to potential allies. Finally, Elder Hyejin spoke for many of them. Perhaps, she said carefully, we should discuss trade agreements instead of invasion plans. Han Sol's smile widened. I think that would be much more productive for everyone involved. As delegates began tentatively discussing peaceful cooperation instead of conquest, one thought echoed through every alien mind in the chamber. They had narrowly avoided making the worst mistake in galactic history.